In this video, we're going to talk a bit about the alternative energy movement in the United States. Alternative energy wasn't really a thing. There was no need for it. Oil and gas were plentiful. There wasn't really a cause to look anywhere else until the 1970s. There was a series of conflicts in the Middle East, an Arab embargo, Iranian Revolution. There was a number of different geopolitical events that caused gasoline shortages, oil shortages in the United States. This led to huge lineups at gas pumps. The price of gas, the price of oil skyrocketed. It really had a devastating effect on the economy, and there was a realization that the economy was vitally dependent on imported oil coming from foreign sources. So these oil shocks and oil scarcity and these long lines at gas stations, gas being rationed, shortages, really caused policymakers and citizens alike to demand that there was an exploration for alternative sources of energy, because this could happen again. Global conflicts, something could disrupt the global flow of oil, that global supply chain, and that would really have a devastating effect on the Americans and us in Canada as well by extension. So one of the first things that policymakers did, and it wasn't really an alternative energy, it was more of a conservation measure, called the CAFE standards. What CAFE standards stands for is Corporate Average Fuel Economy. And what this was a series of regulations that set miles per gallon emission standards for each manufacturer's fleet of vehicles. So this is a performance standard. The entire fleet of vehicles must meet a certain performance. Applied to cars and light trucks were considered separately because there was different sets of emissions limits for each, and there were some exemptions for farmers and things like that. You could earn credit for exceeding the standards. So if you were extra fuel efficient, then that would count. So it was designed to encourage manufacturers to get creative and find ways of lowering the fuel efficiency of their vehicles, or raising the fuel efficiency actually, so they could use less gas. This applied to their entire fleet of cars. And so that seems like a good idea, but in itself caused some problems, because you might have a luxury vehicle manufacturer that might have a very beautiful high-performance car that uses a lot of gas in their fleet. Actually, their whole fleet might be cars like that. But then they might have a couple cars like this, and they don't really go together. What are they doing there? Well, this little thing is designed to bring down the average, because remember, we're talking about corporate average fuel economy. So you might have a bunch of cars that are just pigs. They use a lot of gas. But as long as you've got a couple of these almost zero emission vehicles, then that'll bring down your fleet average. And that's what the CAFE standards were after. So many manufacturers could almost game the system that way. And we could see that for each model year, the CAFE standards got stricter. They got stricter, and manufacturers responded. Cars got better. Cars got more fuel efficient. Subsequent innovation was the Energy Policy Act of 1992 that aimed to integrate the use of alternative fuels in vehicles in federal and state fleets. So this is government vehicles that were going to use alternative fuels. What do they mean by alternative fuels? Well, that's where the catch is. Biodiesel, natural gas that was domestically produced, propane, which is liquefied petroleum gas, electricity, hydrogen, gasoline blends of ethanol and other alcohols, coal-derived fluids. You'll hear things like clean coal and gasified coal. And then fuels other than alcohol derived from biological materials, biofuels other than diesel. So this was a really neat idea, really cool-sounding policy, but many of the things on here were just different versions of fossil fuels. But it was a start. There was also the Renewable Fuel Standards in 2005, which is not that long ago. Basically dictated that transportation fuel sold in the United States contained a minimum volume of renewable fuel. And that renewable fuel was pretty specific. It was ethanol. It set aggregate totals for refiners, and it set different classifications. So you might have a 10% ethanol blend or a 15% ethanol blend. And that would, each vehicle would have to use fuel accordingly. Now with ethanol, being a component, what that means is we've got corn going into our gas tanks. So corn is, by all accounts, renewable. So that seems like a good thing. Also seems pretty odd, and there's some weird economic and political implications behind using ethanol. Why ethanol? Well, that's an interesting question, and that's a topic that we're going to turn to next. Why is it that Americans are such big fans of ethanol?